Thank you all for having me at the virtual Propane Expo. Thank you to our sponsors, which are listed here. So as Bill said, my name is Alex Ng. I am a staff liaison with the National Fire Protection Association and an engineer there. My areas of responsibility are NFPA 54, the National Fuel Gas Code, and NFPA 58, the Liquefied Petroleum Gas Code, as well as many other areas of flammable gases, LNG, purging, all of that, as well as explosives and pyrotechnics. So I do a little bit of everything. So just going into a little bit about NFPA quickly. Our vision is that we are the leading global advocate for the elimination of death, injury, property, and economic loss due to fire, electrical, and related hazards. And to do this, we have our mission. We will help save lives and reduce loss with information, knowledge, and passion. As a nonprofit organization dedicated to fire safety, NFPA works with others who share interest and passion in protecting people and property in our world. We describe this concept of collaboration as the fire and life safety ecosystem, where everyone plays a role in working towards establishing a safe and living environment for all. For instance, policymakers might set regulatory framework. We need to use and enforce the most updated codes and standards. We must have skilled workers in these fields. We need to have the ability to effectively respond to emergencies when they happen. And the public has to be informed and be able to take action for their own safety. An instance of an informed public would be if you smell gas, get out of the house, call 911. They need to be informed as informed in that as you do in the propane industry. All these pieces must be in place in order to protect people and property. When one or more of these important components of the ecosystem fails, safety is compromised and tragedy results. The challenge the ecosystem asks all of us to consider is how do we plan, manage, build, and operate safe environments, structures, communities, etc., while at the same time meeting the needs of all our stakeholders involved. No one organization or group can do this alone, and while we may not prevent every tragedy from happening, we believe that by recommitting to and promoting this full system of safety prevention and protection and education, we can further our work to help save lives and reduce loss. In terms of the fuel gas industry, NFPA, our cog in the ecosystem, is developing and promoting use of current codes as well as creating reference standards. Some examples of codes that we create are the National Fuel Gas Code and the National LP Gas Code. These are comprehensive codes that cover everything about a topic area. So NFPA 58 covers liquefied petroleum gas, propane. We'll have everything you need in there to cover installation, maintenance, all of that. An example of a reference standard that we might reference is NFPA 715, our new gas detector standard. We could reference that in the LP gas code, for instance, to cover when, where, and how to inspect, maintain gas detectors if we so choose to. By attending this presentation, you are fulfilling your responsibility as both an informed public and investing to safety. And I think Bill did a great job of highlighting a lot of that in the beginning. Again, we are committed to safety in this industry, and we want to continually help improve safety and make sure everyone comes home. So this fire and life safety ecosystem is an important concept when looking at the safety industry in relation to fuel gas, because again, it's not all on NFPA to do this alone. It's not all on the government agencies to do it alone. Everyone has their own part to play in this. So I'm just going to briefly go over the standards development process. There are 4 distinct stages in our standards development process. The first stage is the public input stage, where the public gets to input changes into their document. Following that stage, and after the technical committee reviews it, it goes to the public comment stage, where the public again gets a chance to review the changes that the technical committee made to the code, and then provide additional comments and feedback on it. After that, if there's still any changes left that haven't been done, it goes to the NFPA technical meeting, where members of the general public as well as NFPA members get to potentially hash out any final issues they have with the code. And then after that, if there are still pieces left unsolved, it can be a Standards Council appeal, or it becomes a issued consent standard. So just expanding a little bit on how the cycles work, the first draft, which is that public input stage, we take the current edition and we open it up for the public to put comments into it. So the 2021 edition of NFPA 54 was issued beginning of May and will be opened up again so that people can put in text changes to the code. That text is all taken and given to the committee at the first draft, where the committee is obligated to respond to the public changes. Now, the committee can do one of three things at this point with the public inputs. They can either reject a public input because they don't believe it's technically valid or it's addressed somewhere else in the code maybe. They can change the code, and that's a first revision, where they're changing the code, or they're changing the code and proposing a change to the code that will be enacted. And then lastly, they can do a committee input, in which it's a trial balloon where the committee is either looking at changing something or not changing something, but they don't have enough feedback yet, so they want to put it out to the public again. So let's say you don't like something in regards to piping materials in NFPA 54. You can put in a public input and then let the committee act on it. If you want to find out how the committee acted on it, you would go to the first draft report, and I'll tell you how to get to that a little later in my presentation. So you would follow that to the first draft report. Now, from that first draft report, let's say you found the text change that you were trying to make, and they didn't do it exactly the way you wanted it to. You can, again, put in a public comment this time, asking the committee to change it. Once again, goes to the technical committee. The technical committee then reviews it and sees if it's new material, and I'll explain why that's important next. Reviews if it's new material. If it is new material, they can either hold it for the next cycle, which could be in 3 to 4 years, or they could reject it again. If it's not new material, again, they can either reject it or they could provide a legislative text change to the code. And that all goes in the second draft report. Now, the reason why we don't allow no new material at the second draft is because it hasn't had the benefit of public review. So remember, we took the current standard, we did some changes to it, and then we put it back out again for the public to review it. Well, if we make a change at the second draft stage, that public comment stage, if we make a change there, it doesn't have the benefit of public review. It could be contentious and could be overturned later. So it's really important to start your changes as early as possible in the cycle, whether it be submitting a public input to NFPA 54 or whether or not it's attending the meeting and having a committee member be a proponent for your change. Again, this makes it easier down the road. I've had people come to me at second draft stage for that second meeting, try to getting a change in, but it's a new material, so they now have to wait 3 or 4 years. So again, it's important to stay up to date with the codes because, again, the codes move both faster and slower than you want to. Public input passes way faster than you think it is, and then before you know it, the next edition's already passed. So again, if you want to put a change in now, you guys kind of have to be thinking 3 or 4 years in advance. And that's the unfortunate side effect of how our codes work. So again, I'll go over a little bit later how to get involved in the codes. Again, NFPA 54 was posted as a consent standard back in May 7th and will be available for print and digital sometime late August. And then this is just a graphic showing you where it is in that standards ribbon. The next couple slides were relevant to the technical meeting that happened last week, but since NFPA 54 didn't have anything on the technical meeting that needed to be resolved, I'm just going to skip a couple of these slides. So now we're going to go into the significant code changes within NFPA 54, the 2021 edition. Here are some of the key code changes that I've highlighted throughout the code, and then I'll kind of get into individual chapters and sections a little bit later on and break it down by topical area. So firstly, we've defined what an engineering method is and have made requirements for it. So in previous editions of the code, we would say could be done by an approved engineering method or something along those lines. There have been a lot of AHJs, authorities having jurisdiction, that have had question on what an engineering method is. Do I have to have a professional engineer sign off on it? Do I have to have someone using a computer program? What is an engineering method? So we've made requirements for those so that AHJs can more uniformly enforce the code there. Okay. We have any appliances that you are having installed now has to be listed to an appropriate listing standard. We've added a whole bunch of ANSI CSA standards, and this is because having an appliance listed to a listing standard increases the level of safety in that regard. Unlisted appliances are still allowed to be installed, but NFPA 54 has removed some of those unlisted installation requirements, and now I've left it up to the design engineer to get equivalency applied with their AHJ to allow these installations. Pressure control venting. So we've had a bunch of different pressure control devices like gas appliance regulators and line pressure regulators and such. They used to have all sorts of different requirements scattered throughout the code. We've now organized all those in Chapter 5 and standardized them. So you can look for one place for all your pressure control venting requirements. Point of the delivery has been defined. It was buried in Chapter 1. And a lot of times people, when they were looking for what the point of delivery was, went to the definition section. And now it's defined in the definition section so they can more easily act on those requirements. We've expanded on our electric isolation and dielectric fitting installation in the code. Previously, it was under prohibited locations or prohibited installations, but we've really refined that section to reflect what we're actually looking at, and that's electric isolation and preventing your gas piping system from becoming a grounding electrode. And then lastly, field fabrication of connector joints is prohibited for venting systems. So a lot of time, the committee has realized that a number of technicians in the field, when they had to make a T or a Y fitting, for instance, they would put together two pieces of straight pipe, for instance, to create a T or a Y. The problem with some of these installations were that when they were inserting them, they would diminish the vent capacity, which is not something which is a safety hazard. So we've revised that to only require manufactured T's or Y's. So those are the significant code changes. And now I'll just go into a little bit of each of the changes in each of the chapters. For equivalency, since we've removed a lot of the unlisted appliances installation requirements, we've added some examples of equivalency so that authorities having jurisdiction have a better idea of what they can and can't approve for equivalency. So we've added those in Chapter 1. Additionally, since we added a lot of those CSA ANSI standards in the appliance installation section, we updated a lot of the reference standards in Chapter 2. So you could go there to figure out the appropriate year in addition of the standard we were looking at. Point of delivery, again, has been defined. We added definitions for system shutoff and service shutoff. So service shutoffs can only be were previously in the code, but according to DOT FEMSA, they could only be operated by a qualified person, which members of the public and certain technicians are not qualified persons, so they couldn't activate them. So to get around that requirement, certain gas companies have been installing system shutoffs, which essentially performs the same function, shuts off the gas supply to the system, and can be operated by a non-qualified person. And then lastly, in the definition section, we've also narrowed condensate down to exclude flue gases, because the condensate we were thinking of was drip liquids and liquids in the context of this code. So we've narrowed down that definition. Chapter 4 has all the general requirements. Some of the changes here, again, we've added requirements for engineering methods. And then we changed when notification of drip liquids is required. There are certain instances, mainly industrial settings, where it gets kind of tedious to notify the servicing gas supplier of drip liquids. And some of these industries have better practices, or it's part of their normal operating procedures to handle these drip liquids. So we've changed when the notification is required for drip liquids. Moving on to the piping requirements in chapters 5 and 6. The specific location of the point of delivery is in accordance with DOT FEMSA or NFPA 58, depending on the type of fuel gas you're using. Both of those applications are outside the scope of NFPA 54's code, because again, we take over after at the outlet of either the gas meter or the second stage regulator. So it's out. We removed all those requirements because it's outside the scope of our code. Pressure control venting requirements. Again, we reorganized those in Chapter 5 and concentrated them there. We have shutoff valve selection table now in Chapter 5. So depending on the pressure your manual shutoff valves are seeing, they're going to have to be listed to different listing standards. So we've created a table for those in there. If you're heat fusing polyamide piping, you need to have that labeled as such nearby. And then lastly, one of the piping tables, 631D, We corrected. Previously, we were missing 2 lines in that table, so it would overcalculate piping capacity, rest of the rows in the table, so we've revised that. For piping installation requirements, we've now added requirements for compatibility of pipe sealing materials. It has come to the committee's attention that some pipe sealing materials that have been used weren't appropriate for the system they were being used in, so the committee has requirements for evaluating that. We've changed the elevation of above ground piping and above roof piping. It's been raised to about 3.5 inches, such that debris can flow underneath the piping and not get stuck there and accumulate. Again, we've revised the electrical isolation and dielectric fittings installation section. And then in order to accommodate the changes for system and main gas system and service shutoffs, we've revised some of those requirements there and added some requirements for the the system shutoff. Appliance requirements in chapters 9 and 10. So in addition to requiring the appliances to be listed to the appropriate ANSI standard, we are also requiring that the appliances be converted in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. So if you're converting from natural gas to propane or propane back to natural gas, the appliances have to be converted in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, because some appliances can't be converted, or the appliance manufacturer has specific requirements for converting it. Additionally, any gas appliance regulators that are required, those are going to be required to be listed as well to an appropriate listing standard. Chapters 12 and 13 cover venting. So some of the venting changes we have in our standard. Any factory-built chimneys have to be listed, and there's an appropriate UL standard in the code that is listed to. Direct vent appliances that are allowed to have through-the-wall vent terminations. We've created a new table and chart so that all of the distances are harmonized with the appropriate ANSI CSA listing standards for direct vent appliances. And that way they're not in conflict with the other codes. Again, we require that all installations for venting systems be in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions as well as the appliance manufacturer's instructions. This is because certain appliances have to be vented in certain ways in order to maintain their listing. So installation of the appropriate venting system must be maintained in order to appropriately accommodate the listing. Same thing with condensation drains in that regard. Field fabrication of joints is prohibited as before. And then lastly, we added requirements for balancing baffles. So previously in the code, we still do have a prohibition for manual dampers and other obstructions in the venting, because again, these things can be inadvertently turned or maneuvered into a way that it restricts the venting and causes inappropriate venting. But balancing baffles are required to balance the draft system in some systems. So these are baffles that are manual, but as soon as they're balanced, they're locked into place. So they can't be inadvertently turned. And then lastly, some changes to the non-mandatory requirements section. Annex G has been revised to address spillage and adequate combustion air. Previous editions, order of operations kind of didn't make sense, so we kind of revised it such that they match what the industry is practicing. And then also Annex G recommends replacement of the appliance regardless of damage assessment. Previously, we had to have the technician assess the damage and recommend or not recommend a replacement, but in terms of liability, it's a lot harder to have technicians do that. So again, our recommendation here is just to replace the appliance in that regard. So those are all the changes within NFPA 54, and we'll handle questions in a second. But my last piece is how can you learn more and how can you get involved in the NFPA process, or how you can be able to get all our changes. So the content of this presentation is available in a fact sheet that's available at nfpa.org/54 news. There's a news tab there that you can bring open a fact sheet to see some of the major changes in the code that I have, as well as some other handy frequently asked questions and stuff like that. Additionally, if you go to that website, you can sign up for document alerts. So I have that signed up on my computer. So it lets me know when reports have posted, when changes to the code have been made, when meetings are coming up, when there's new material available. That's a handy thing. You can sign up there for email alerts, and you can just sign up there and forget, and then it gives you a reminder whenever that comes up. NFPA 54 has a handbook as well that provides graphics, visual aids, extra commentary. It goes over certain aspects of the code in more depth to help explain it, as well as highlight some of the new changes a little bit better in explaining why we put some of these things in there. So again, there's a handbook for that, and that's a resource you can use as well. And then lastly, you can join our NFPA membership as well as our Exchange server. So some of the benefits of becoming an NFPA member is not only do you get to vote at our annual technical meeting on certain changes, that's important if you're passionate about the changes in the code. You can get one-on-one help with technical questions if you in the code. You get access to other content, and you can also connect with colleagues if you also have code questions. The other big thing here is the service also allows you to see previous questions that people have had, as well as the answers. So that's also helpful because, again, oftentimes people don't have a new and unique situation. It's probably been asked a million times. So signing up for Exchange, going on Exchange could definitely be a resource that you guys can use as engineers to increase your knowledge and your safety. And then lastly, you might have seen our tagline, "It's a great big world, let's protect it together." It's just not a slogan for us, it's a call to action. And through that, we hope you'll join us in protecting this world that we live in. Thank you guys for your time, and I guess I'll give it back to Bill for any questions you guys have.
All right. Hey, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's a wrap. Please do send me a copy of your presentation. We'll put it with the recorded portion of the expo, and that way we can connect as needed in the future. So super helpful, and thank you so much for being a part of this. Without your assistance and keeping us on the straight and narrow, we would go adrift, right? So appreciate it, man. Yeah, thanks a lot. So we're just going to do a little housekeeping at this point, and again, great presentation and really top notch. So thanks again. Underneath presentations, past presentations, that's where we're going to go ahead and put your presentation in the future, and we're going to hopefully do that recording next week. So it should be over there at that point. For our next presenter, it's going to be the Transportation Compliance Insider Tips Spotlight interview. And there's some interesting stories here and some about how they've helped companies just like every company in our industry. So I think that it's going to be extremely pertinent, and you're going to hear some insider tips on how to avoid some of the challenges that are out there, and also how to handle them too. Okay, great. So that's going to be up at 3 p.m. In the meantime, we do have a big thank you to the sponsors here. And one of the sponsors we called out just a minute ago is the Propane University. And if you click their logo, it takes you directly over to their booth. And in their booth, you might have seen this exhibitor booth before. Mike DiGiorgio, 40 plus years in safety training, live, digital, online, live and online, also live in person, but also live online training, and kind of really the pioneer for live, real, high-tech online training at a much lower price point than any of the other former ways of doing safety training. He is the president of the Propane Defense Association. He speaks and works nationally and internationally with attorneys as an expert witness. To learn more, click here, product video, click here. And he espouses this. This is also the Tank Spotter propane safety app, so he espouses it as the best safety app that he has seen in his 40 years, as does, per the world competition, the Tank Spotter application was selected as the best safety app on Apple, Android, and it does everything our service techs need to do and everything our sales reps need to do, all on a single app, Propane Safety App. You can download it from the Google Play Store, the Apple Play Store, and it's called Tank Spotter, and it's kind of a cutting-edge new technology for helping us take what we learn in safety and then implement it. So check that out. And we will be starting up again in just a couple minutes. Thanks so much. I'll be turning this off and turning off the recording, and we'll see you in the next presentation. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye.